Welcome back to the Other Side of 45's podcast. I'm your host, Randy Black. This podcast is about taking chances, owning my mistakes, addressing generational and family trauma and curses, completing my 50/50s by 50 list, and my life as a single empty nester. If this is your first time listening, welcome. Please subscribe and rate this podcast 5 stars. This is the first episode in March, which is National Women's Month. Today's episode will focus on the type of mother I aim to be for my daughters. So, let's dive in. I wanted my daughters to be comfortable in their skin, feminist, of course, and to advocate for themselves and others. While I veered from raising my children from the blueprint I was given, there were things that I was taught and learned that I valued and kept. If you are a regular listener, you know I'm a sucker for classic TV. Some of my favorites are Leave It to Beaver, The Andy Griffith Show, What's Happening, Bewitched, The Jeffersons, and Good Times. I could record hundreds of episodes based on these shows. But this episode is about one particular show and an episode. Leave It to Beaver, Season 1, Episode 11, Beaver's Short Pants. We just call them shorts nowadays. The mom, June, played by Barbara Billingsley, must leave home to help her sister care for a new baby. Her Aunt Martha is asked to come and take care of the Cleaver household in her absence. When Aunt Martha sees Beaver, she doesn't think he's dressed like a little boy should. She takes him shopping for what she considers proper clothing: a suit with short pants, long stockings, bow tie, and formal cap for Beaver. And he feels embarrassed wearing his new clothes. What I found funny is the great lengths the family went through to spare Aunt Martha's feelings, and so just telling her the truth. Now, yes, I understand this is a sitcom, and the easy way is never the fun way, so it had to happen the way it did. But look, Ward changes Beaver's clothes in the garage to keep this secret from Aunt Martha. Now, if we were to judge this episode from today's standards, most would conclude that Aunt Martha overstepped her boundaries, and the parents put undue pressure on their sons to conform to what was considered Aunt Martha's old-fashioned values. But if you were a regular of the show, you would notice that most of the time the characters' way of dress, if you compare it to today's standards, was more formal. June would wear hats and gloves to dinner that she went to from family and friends. Ward and the sons, Wall and the Beaver, wore jackets and ties when they were not at home. Way more formal than what we would do today. Regardless, this episode struck a chord with me. Both of my daughters were encouraged to be feminists, as I stated earlier. I stood up for them and advocated not only for my children, but students in the school through my involvement in the PTA. That's why this episode triggered me, but in a good way. See, June was practically raised by Aunt Martha, who had no children of her own. June and Ward were modern parents who veered from raising their sons from how they were raised. Wall and Beaver wore jeans and casual clothes to school, which was, again, different than how Aunt Martha was raised, hence the shopping trip to put Beaver in more suitable clothing. Now, Aunt Martha felt it was too late for Wally to change because he was a teenager. This episode touched many parts of my life. So when my oldest was in middle school, I received a call from her that she was being disciplined for a dress code violation. Now this was alarming because at this stage in their lives, I did their shopping and improved all of my children's clothing. So I asked my daughter what happened, and she explained that one of her teachers felt her pants were compression pants and they were inappropriate for school. My daughter had on what the store we purchased from called sweater pants. They had the material of a sweater and were perfect in my mind for cold days like that day was. And I had not heard of compression pants. And I immediately looked this up in preparation for my meeting with the assistant principal. I also looked up the school's dress code. With this research, I headed to my meeting ready to defend my child and me since I had approved her wardrobe. In the meeting, I questioned the teacher's decision to single out my daughter based on her opinion, shared with the assistant principal my research on the difference between sweater pants and compression pants. The assistant principal tried to defend the teacher, but ultimately the school's handbook and my natural ability to argue ended in an apology and an admission that the teacher felt it was inappropriate because my daughter was curvy, aka had a larger butt than her white counterparts, and the boys could get distracted, which of course did not sit well with me. And I had to point out how wrong that type of thinking was and hurtful to students of color and female students who were blessed with curves. Let's just say they never questioned her clothing again. Sometimes I wonder why people go there with me. Anyway, so my coworkers used to say there was a flag in my girls' school records warning the administration about me. I don't think that's true, although based on some of the conversations, I know that my reputation preceded me. As a mother raised black daughters, there always seemed to be a fight, especially when they entered their predominantly white high school in an affluent area. My girls knew that I was only a phone call away, ready to take on the administration on their behalf. The girls had learned to advocate for themselves by then, so if they called me, I knew it was huge and I had to come fully equipped, ready for battle. Fortunately for the school, those battles were few and far between the 5 years that we were there. I recall conversations defending the curvier girls in the school when the administration, even in high school, used but it can be a distraction for the boys. I remember I had to point out to the school's principal that the school had caught one of the boys enjoying his body alone in his mother's classroom. There were no girls in sight, and yet he used his mother's empty classroom to pleasure himself until he was caught. Now, that story may sound funny, but the way the information is shared, that poor child was humiliated and had to take time away from school. Even though what he did is normal, that information being shared to other students was embarrassing for him. And of course, yes, it violated school policy. One of the fights I was excluded from, because my oldest daughter handled it, was another dress code violation. She and a friend were in the assistant principal's office discussing her inappropriate shirt. As she and her best friend were in the office arguing the biased sexist dress code, a male student just so happened to walk by wearing a tank top. They pointed out that he had on a tank top, just like my daughter did. The principal finally then stated that the issue was that her bra strap was exposed because the tank top was not wide enough to cover the strap. So what does my wonderful daughter do? She takes off her bra in the office. Now, she didn't expose herself by just removing the shirt, but if you're a woman, you understand that you can take a bra off without removing your shirt. But she did that right there in his office. I think the principal was shocked and didn't want to discuss this any longer, so he dismissed the girls. Funny, she was never called in for a dress code violation again after this. This is one of those moments that I will never forget. I'm so proud of my baby. Just wish I could have been there to see his face when she removed that bra. So, as you may or may not know, when the girls were in high school, they were very active. Cheer, dance, track, founder of the Black Student Union, student council, orchestra, many other clubs and organizations. Their varsity cheer and dance coach was a self-described good Italian girl who listened to her father and did what she was told. As a team on for both teams she coached, she and I had many conversations. We were pretty close. She and I would talk about how the students today defiled authority. She thought it was rude and that they were undisciplined. She said, I would never tell my teachers no and would blindly do as she was told despite how she felt. And I explained to her, I raised my children to do the opposite. And of course, I wanted them to be respectful, but if the rules were not fair, then they should speak up. The coach told me that she wanted to go to college and stay on campus, but her very strict Italian father wanted to keep an eye on her and refused to allow her to live on campus. She had to commute every day and work. She didn't get to make many friends at college and missed out on the full experience, but as she put it, she was a good Italian girl who did as she was told. It was so hard for her to fathom doing anything else, even after all those years. The coach and I discussed how the girls bucked the system and why they had to do it. It's funny. She was the one that disclosed the racism on the cheer team, yet she felt speaking up and fighting against racism was not appropriate. Yes, we called out the racism on the cheer team. A story for another day. But back to that episode of Leave It to Beaver. It reminded me of the girls' cheer and dance coach. She would have been like June, who advised her boys not to make trouble during Aunt Martha's visit. June knew that Aunt Martha was old-fashioned and that she and Ward had a different way of raising their children, but she kept quiet and, like the coach said, was a good girl and did as she was told. This March, for National Women's History Month, we celebrate the women who refuse to do just as they are told. I purchased a Barbie's signature Ella Fitzgerald Inspiring Women collector doll. Now, I wanted the Shonda Rhimes role model doll, Barbie, but it's not available for purchase yet. I will be stalking Barbie's website. I'm getting the Maya Angelo and Ida B. Wells collector dolls. Now, if you have access to the Shonda Rhimes doll before I do, please feel free to buy it and gift it to me. Side note, I used to collect porcelain dolls many years ago. Well, I started collecting but couldn't afford the dolls I wanted, and then I had children and put this hobby aside. Now that I'm able to collect dolls, I really want to, and I think I may start collecting again. It actually wasn't until I saw Shonda Rhimes post on her Instagram that Barbie made a doll of her that made me think I used to really be into porcelain dolls. But I like this new collection that Barbie's doing, so I'm going to buy the ones that I've mentioned thus far. But anyway, back then, when I used to collect porcelain dolls, I would visit antique stores and estate sales to find the perfect doll. Anyway, not only did my oldest daughter do what she felt was right when she was caught violating the school's dress code, she also started a Black Art Expo at the school that they still use to this day. Since graduating and being in college, her art teacher saw her working and told her that they were still using her idea for the Black Art Expo, and that she told the students that the idea came from my daughter. My daughter was so proud, and of course, so was I. Now my oldest daughter has an internship doing the marketing material for a local church, local meaning in Tennessee, because that's where her school is. And she is now accepting commissions on her Instagram. I'll post her Instagram information in the show notes. My youngest daughter has been accepted to the Phi Alpha Delta Law Fraternity. The induction ceremony is scheduled later this month. And if you are a returning listener, you know that she is also a member of the National Council of Negro Women. So, Women History Month isn't just about those who came before us. It's also about those who are next to make history. And I believe my daughters are next to make history. Can you hear the smile on my face when I talk about my girls? As the great Mary J Blige says in the theme song for my life, Just Fine. I like what I see when I'm looking at me, when I'm walking past the mirror. Don't stress through the night at a time in my life. Ain't worried about if you feel it. Got my head on straight. I got my vibe right. I ain't gonna let you kill it. You see, I wouldn't change my life. My life's just fine. Meet me on the other side of 45's podcast, blog, YouTube, website, and Instagram. New episodes will be released every Monday. Thank you for tuning in. And remember, please rate the podcast on Apple Podcasts so that others can find it. It helps grow my podcast. Your feedback and support is appreciated.